Recently, I was shopping with my son in Philadelphia. We were having a heated negotiation with the people in the store, and I felt I needed to go get advice. So I walked outside, and as I step outside to call my negotiating advisor, I'm hearing African Giant play over the loudspeaker. I'm like, wow, in Philadelphia, in a car dealership, in the middle of nowhere, I'm hearing African Giant. So I went back in the negotiation and I said, yes, indeed, I am an African giant. Recently again, I was in a client dinner in New York. And I, sitting there, and over the chamber speakers, you're hearing Rush, our star. Once again, I'm like, oh, they don't find me. They have followed me here. Of course, that gave me an embrace, a warm feeling that I was home, although I wasn't. And we had our conversation. Now, this is the wildest of them all. Again, I'll say recently one more. I was in Cartagena, Colombia. I'm walking in the streets with friends, and out of the bars, I'm hearing Charlie Poppy. I'm like, in Colombia? Afrobeats? So the world loves Afrobeats. Africa loves Afrobeats. I love Afrobeats. I'm sure you guys love Afrobeats as well. So the question is, how did this come about? How did we create an industry that is in the billions of dollars and is the largest export, one of the largest exports into the world? The answer is simple. Policy. Not so exciting, just policy. Now, if you wish, come with me to my time machine, and I'll take you back about 17 years ago. In the administration of President Olusegun Obasanjo, a policy was released about local content that dictated that 60% of the music played should be local music. We referred to it back then as Play 2, Play 1, which was 2 local, 1 international. Now, at the time, some of us weren't very excited about this because that meant we wouldn't hear our Jay-Z anymore, you know. But we soon got to embrace and love M.I., Mr. Incredible. We soon got to embrace and love D'banj, you know. And this is how it started, right? So policy literally created that industry. So, if you want to say what's the world we want to see in the future, I would say with this policy creation, ultimately, we can find ourselves in space and hearing Afrobeats still playing. And the policy took time to get us there. Now, what is policy? Policy is government intentions. It can come as a policy statement where government says we're going to do this. It can come as a regulation, which a lot of us are fans of, especially our startups. Or it can come as legislation, which is the law. What you must find is that if you ask the question to me and said, you know, Oswald, who is the ecosystem? Myself and every other entrepreneur would say, we are. We never consider the fact that the public sector are members of the ecosystem, that the ecosystem is made up of public and private. I like to refer to it as policymakers and practitioners. And of course, lawyers and academias all make up this ecosystem. So, there's this framework, disruption versus displacement. We all love disruption. Disruption is what we support. Disruption is what we invest in. Disruption is amazing when a startup does disruption. Disruption can take a process and make it better. Disruption can create a new market. Disruption is exactly what was referred to in the book, the Paradox book, talking about marketing, creating innovations. But the issue with this is that the people in public sector players, do not see disruption. What they see is displacement. Essentially, something has changed. The policymakers' number one job is to protect citizens and protect what currently exist. So, if you are in Yaba creating this new fantastic disruptive tool and you have not discussed it with government or found a way to discuss it with government, you will be seen as displacement. So if you like, pass every single issue you've seen a ban about through this, and you find that entrepreneur did a disruption, government saw displacement, and then there was a ban. Now, what's the problem here? The problem is lack of collaboration. We have lack of collaboration within government, which often, and almost often, shows up as a lack of coordination. You all know that conversation. How come this agency is doing this and this agency is doing the opposite? So lack of collaboration within government presents itself as lack of coordination. Then you have a lack of collaboration within the private sector, which presents itself as a lack of value creation opportunities. Because the private sector is not organized, we lose opportunities. What makes this worse? When you now have a lack of collaboration between the private sector and the public sector. Essentially, we will never get to our real potentials. So, the Big Tent approach. As I said, most of us who are entrepreneurs, we see ourselves as lone wolves. We don't understand the entire dynamics of the ecosystem and where we stand in it. Now, the Big Tent, as you can see, has no doors. It ultimately is welcoming everybody. The roof of the tent is literally the purpose. And the poles, the stakeholders, hold up this tent. The idea is that you should be able to get all stakeholders into a room and have a collaborative conversation about the value creation that's required for that ecosystem. As an entrepreneur, what's key for you is that you must understand the policies that guide your business. If you do not understand the policies that guide your business, then you may be at a loss. Because after understanding the policies that guide your business, you must then challenge those policies that guide your business in a sense of how can you influence those policies to be more forward-thinking. And then ultimately, you must commit to what's indeed possible within governance. Now, you've heard me say value-creating innovation. In essence, today, I'm saying we must also think of policy as a critical part to value-creating innovation. We must think of market-creating policies. In Africa, in Nigeria, we have several problems. Sometimes I refer to them as fantastic problems that I believe that digital can fix. But until we get the policy right, we may never get to those problems. We may never have an innovative way to address those problems. Ultimately, and this is categorically, there is no industry in the world that is not led or supported by policy. It doesn't exist. You must have the right policy infrastructure in place for market to be created. So if you run this through any number of problems, we have a digital inclusion problem, we have a digital literacy problem. These are massive problems that prevent us from digitalization of Africa. One of the key interesting things that I recently came to understand myself is that when you talk about digital literacy, it's often thought that the idea is the person cannot speak English or cannot read English. We miss the fact that it's actually the person cannot read. So if you put outside in front of them, You put Yoruba in front of them, they won't be able to read. So that essentially means that our education policies, our policies that guide that space, need to say which innovations and which policies must we put in place to ensure that governance can get to people who don't read. Is it that we use AI to have the conversation to register for your passports? Policies allow for new ways of thinking. If the policies that exist restrict innovation to paper, then you can never go voice. So, it's an example of a Big Ten approach leading to policy, or in this case, actually legislation. Nigerian Startup Act had over 800 volunteers. I always shudder when I say that myself. Over 2 million engagements, citizens all over the country engaged about it. But it served as an example of how policymaking can happen when you pull all the stakeholders into a room. Essentially, everybody who works in the Nigerian Startup Act, I run into them sometimes, and they talk to me like, we did that. And they did. Everybody felt a part of the process. What is critical is that it is to the citizens' benefit to participate in governance. It's to the entrepreneur's benefit to understand what policies guides your space. There is no government, there is no private sector person. We're all citizens playing different roles. And we're all citizens of Nigeria. In a situation where you find yourself standing to the side and allowing governance to happen without you, you are essentially sanctioning autocracy. So, I'll leave you with this. Policy is essentially a tool of governance. But collaborative policy development engagement is actually what democracy is. Thank you.